A cold, stark morning breaks as Thomas stares at his phone in disbelief. The news headlines flash. His business is on the brink of collapse. His pulse races as his finger hovers over the screen. The weight of the moment hangs heavy. He never thought it would come to this. His phone buzzes again. Another investor calls. The clock is ticking. It feels like his entire future is slipping away. A desperate breath escapes him as he considers his options. Fight or watch everything crumble. His heart pounds in his chest. This is the moment of truth. The call ends abruptly, leaving Thomas staring at his phone, a mix of disbelief and frustration still etched on his face. He slams it down onto the desk, sinking into the chair. His mind races. He needs a way out, but nothing seems to work. He runs a hand through his hair, trying to clear the mental fog. His thoughts are a whirlwind of past decisions, broken promises, and the looming reality of his failure. This was supposed to be his empire, his success story. Now, it feels like everything is slipping away faster than he can grasp. He takes a deep breath, the weight of the moment suffocating him. A knock on the door pulls him out of his thoughts, but he's not sure he's ready to face anyone else just yet. The door creaks open. Rachel, his loyal assistant, steps in, her face a picture of concern. Thomas, the investors are asking about the numbers, she says, her voice gentle but firm. He rubs his temples, trying to summon the energy to respond. I know, he mutters, but what can I tell them? The business is collapsing, Rachel. It's over. She stands in front of him, her expression softening. Don't give up, Thomas. We still have time. We can salvage this. Her words are filled with hope, but he can hear the uncertainty in her voice. His mind spins, torn between trusting her optimism and the cold reality of their situation. A brief silence hangs in the air before he speaks again, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Thomas stares at Rachel, the silence between them thickening. His heart feels like it's beating in his throat. I can't fix this, he says, his voice low and pained. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's all falling apart. Rachel steps forward, resting her hand gently on his shoulder. You're not alone in this, Thomas. We can figure something out together. Her words bring him no comfort. In that moment, he realizes that no matter how much support he has, the weight of failure may be too much to overcome. The feeling of losing control begins to suffocate him. He stands abruptly, pacing, trying to shake off the panic clawing at him. But with every step, it feels like the walls are closing in tighter. Thomas stops in his tracks, his hand clenched into a fist. He knows that the path forward is filled with uncertainty. I have to make a choice, Rachel. I can't keep pretending this is going to fix itself. Her voice is soft, but it cuts through the tension. You can still turn this around, Thomas. But we need a plan. He turns back to face her, his face pale and drawn. Plan? There's no plan that'll save us. We need a miracle. She looks at him with a mixture of empathy and determination. Maybe we don't need a miracle. Maybe we just need to do what's hard. His gaze softens as he meets her eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. But deep down, Thomas knows that any decision from here could be the one that either saves or ruins. The phone rings again, breaking the suffocating silence. It's the investor, Peter. Thomas hesitates for a moment before answering. I can't believe this is happening, Thomas mutters under his breath. The call picks up, and Peter's voice is cold and calculating. Thomas, we need answers. The numbers aren't looking good, and I'm beginning to question my involvement. The words sting, and Thomas' grip on the phone tightens. He stands up, pacing, his mind racing. He can feel his stomach churn with anxiety. I'm doing everything I can, Thomas says, his voice cracking slightly. We've got a plan in place. Just give me a little more time. Peter's response is quick and dismissive. Time is money, Thomas. You're running out of both. The line goes dead, and Thomas is left staring at the screen, feeling the weight of the failure bearing down on him. He sinks into the chair once more, the call echoing in his mind. He knows that things are slipping out of his control, but he doesn't know how to stop it. After the call, Thomas stands at the window, looking out at the city below. His thoughts are a whirlwind, but they're interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. It's Rachel, her expression a mixture of concern and resolve. Thomas, we need to talk. The investors are losing confidence, and they're demanding answers. Thomas turns, his expression weary but determined. I know, he says, his voice low, but I'm running out of time, Rachel. I need more breathing room. Rachel steps into the room, her voice steady but urgent. We can't keep pushing things down the road. We need a plan that's going to get their trust back, or we'll lose everything. Her words hit home, and for a moment Thomas feels a flicker of hope. But as he looks out the window again, the reality sinks in. Time is running out, and the choices ahead are only getting harder. Rachel takes a step forward, her gaze never leaving Thomas. You've been pushing yourself too hard. Maybe it's time to reach out to someone for help, she suggests gently. Thomas shakes his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. I can't, Rachel. Asking for help now would be an admission of failure. I need to figure this out on my own. The silence that follows is heavy, filled with the unspoken weight of the situation. Rachel sighs, trying once again to reason with him. Thomas, you're not alone. You don't have to do this by yourself. But if we don't act now, we won't have anything left to save. Thomas' shoulders slump as he finally meets her gaze. His resolve falters, but his pride holds him back. I can't just let it all go, Rachel. I built this from the ground up. I'm not giving up now. But the uncertainty in his voice betrays his inner turmoil, and Rachel, sensing the shift, simply nods in understanding. Later that afternoon, Thomas sits at his desk, reviewing a set of reports. The numbers are worse than he thought. Every figure seems to mock him. As he pores over the data, the weight of the looming collapse feels suffocating. The phone buzzes again, and he picks it up without looking, expecting more bad news. But it's not who he expected. It's Peter again. Thomas, Peter begins, his tone more urgent this time. I don't know how much longer we can wait. The board is starting to lose patience. Thomas exhales sharply, trying to mask his growing panic. I'm doing everything I can, he replies, his voice trembling slightly. I just need more time. There's a long pause before Peter responds, his voice cold. You're running out of it. The call ends abruptly, and Thomas slams the phone down, his mind racing. He realizes that the end may be closer than he thought. With the call ended, Thomas stands by the window again, looking out at the city. The weight of the situation bears down on him. He feels like a failure, unable to save the company he built. I've got to do something, he mutters to himself, as if trying to convince himself. Rachel walks in, her face soft with concern. Thomas, you're not a failure, she says, her voice gentle. But you're also not alone in this. It's okay to ask for help. He turns to face her, a bitter smile pulling at his lips. I'm not sure there's anyone who can help now. Her gaze softens, and she steps closer. We'll figure it out together, one step at a time. Thomas stares at her, his frustration momentarily replaced by the faintest flicker of hope. He doesn't know what's next, but he realizes he might not have to do it alone. Thomas sits across from Rachel, the weight of their dwindling options hanging over them like a storm cloud. He takes a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. We've tried everything, Rachel. Every avenue we've pursued has led us to a dead end. Rachel, sitting opposite him, doesn't flinch. Her eyes are steady as she listens. There has to be something we can do, she says softly, but Thomas can hear the doubt in her voice. He rubs his temples, exhausted. I don't know what's left, he admits. But maybe it's time for a big gamble. Rachel looks at him, her brow furrowing in concern. What do you mean? Thomas leans forward, his voice quiet but resolute. I'm talking about taking the last of our funds and investing it into a risky venture. If it pays off, we survive. If not, well, that's the end of it all. Rachel's eyes narrow. That's a huge risk. We're already on the edge, Thomas. What if we lose it all? He looks at her, his face hardening. We'll have nothing to lose then. It's now or never. The decision weighs heavily on Thomas's mind as the days pass. He spends long hours reviewing documents, his hand shaking slightly with each turn of the page. The risk is immense, but something in him keeps coming back to it. Finally, he makes the call. The money is transferred. There's no going back now. Rachel watches quietly from the doorway, her face a mix of hope and fear. Are you sure? She asks when she enters the room. Thomas turns, his eyes tired but resolute. I'm sure. It's our last shot. He doesn't say it, but they both know the truth. If this fails, they'll lose everything. The silence in the room feels suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside. Rachel steps forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. We're in this together, right? Thomas nods. But inside, he's terrified. Together, he whispers, though doubt clouds his voice. Days pass, but the tension never relents. Every phone call, every email feels like it could be the end. Thomas becomes a shadow of himself, irritable, distant, and barely able to keep his composure. Rachel tries to maintain some sense of normalcy, but even she is feeling the strain. We need a plan B, she says one evening after a particularly devastating phone call. I've been working on a few alternatives, Thomas replies, though his voice is barely audible. But it's all just speculation. Nothing is certain. The frustration in his voice is evident, and Rachel watches him closely, sensing that something is breaking. She steps closer, gently placing a hand on his arm. We'll get through this, Thomas. We always do, she says, though her words are more for herself than for him. He looks up at her, a ghost of a smile crossing his lips. I hope so, he says softly, but the fear in his eyes betrays his uncertainty. The days continue to bleed into each other. One morning, Thomas stares at the numbers once again, the familiar dread creeping back into his chest. The risky investment has yet to show results. Every passing day seems to make the failure more inevitable. Then, as if on cue, his phone rings. It's an unfamiliar number. He answers hesitantly, his heart pounding. Thomas? A voice on the other end asks. This is Andrew from the investment firm. We've been monitoring the markets, and things are looking up. You made the right choice. Thomas's heart skips a beat. For the first time in days, a spark of hope flickers inside him. He forces himself to stay calm, not wanting to jinx it. That's good to hear, he replies, his voice steady despite the excitement threatening to break through. But I need more details. We're not out of the woods yet. The voice on the other end reassures him. But Thomas knows it's not over. Not yet. Rachel enters the room just as Thomas hangs up the phone. What happened? She asks, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He turns to her, his eyes shining with cautious optimism. We might just have a shot, Rachel. The market's shifting, and it looks like the investment is starting to pay off. Rachel's eyes widen with disbelief, but then a smile slowly spreads across her face. That's great news, Thomas. I knew we could turn it around. He gives a tight smile, but the weight of the situation still hangs heavy on his shoulders. Don't get too excited. This is just the beginning. There's still a long way to go. Rachel nods, though her smile doesn't fade. We'll take it one step at a time, she says, her voice filled with renewed hope. Thomas nods in agreement, but deep down, he knows that the hardest part is still ahead. The phone rings again, this time with an unexpected caller. It's David, an old friend who had once been a major investor in Thomas's business. "Thomas, we need to talk." David's voice is urgent. Thomas sits up straight, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "What's going on?" he asks, trying to steady his breath. "I've been watching your recent moves," David says, "and I need to warn you. There's someone inside your operation sabotaging you from within." Thomas' heart skips a beat. "What are you talking about?" he asks, feeling the weight of the accusation. "I can't go into the details over the phone, but you need to act fast. Someone has been manipulating your numbers, pushing you towards this collapse." The words hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. His mind races as he wonders who could be behind it. "David, I don't know who to trust anymore," Thomas says, his voice shaky. "I'll send you everything I know. Meet me tonight," David insists before hanging up. Thomas is left in stunned silence, every instinct telling him that this is the revelation that could turn everything around. But at what cost? That evening, Thomas meets David in a dimly lit cafe. David is already seated at a corner table, looking around nervously. When Thomas sits down, David leans in, speaking in a low voice. "I know you think everything's falling apart on its own, but it's not. Someone is pulling the strings behind the scenes." Thomas shakes his head, unable to comprehend. "Who would do that? Who's working against me?" David pauses, his eyes flicking nervously around the cafe. "It's your business partner, Rachel." The words feel like a slap in the face. Thomas recoils, disbelief written all over his face. "You're lying. Rachel's been with me from the start. She's been loyal." David's gaze hardens. "I'm not lying, Thomas. I have the proof. She's been siphoning funds for months, manipulating the numbers, and setting you up to fail. It's all part of her plan to take over when you collapse." Thomas feels the ground beneath him give way. He's caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, rage, and confusion. "You have to be wrong," he says, but David slides a folder across the table, filled with documents and records that prove it all. Thomas's mind spins as he stares at the documents in front of him. His whole world feels like it's been shattered in an instant. "I don't understand," he mutters, shaking his head. "Why would she do this?" David looks him in the eye. "Money, Thomas. Greed. Power. She's been setting you up for a takeover." Thomas looks down at the papers, his fingers trembling. "But she's been loyal. She's been here through all the hard times." David leans back, his voice quiet but firm. "Sometimes people aren't who they seem. She's been playing the long game, waiting for this moment." Thomas can't process the information, his heart hammering in his chest. "I need to confront her," he says finally, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "But how can I trust anything now? How do I know she hasn't been playing me the entire time?" David shakes his head, his tone serious. "You need to be careful, Thomas. If she knows that you know, it could get ugly. But you don't have much time left." The following day, Thomas confronts Rachel in her office. The tension is palpable. Rachel looks up, her expression unreadable. "Thomas, what's going on?" she asks, her voice casual but with a hint of nervousness. He stands in front of her, holding the folder David gave him, and drops it on her desk. "What's this?" he demands. Rachel's eyes flick over the papers quickly, and for a split second, a flash of panic crosses her face before she masks it with a calm exterior. "You don't understand, Thomas," she says, her voice steady, but there's a slight tremor in her words. "I can explain?" Thomas crosses his arms, his face hardening. "Explain? How do you explain this? You've been sabotaging the company from the inside, Rachel." She stands up, her hands slightly shaking, but her gaze remains fixed on him. "It's not what you think," she says, her voice softening. "I was trying to save us. The business was collapsing, and I did what I had to do. You weren't seeing the bigger picture." But Thomas, his heart pounding, isn't buying it. "Save us? By betraying me?" His voice rises. This is the end, Rachel. Rachel's voice falters as she tries to explain herself, but Thomas can't hear it anymore. The betrayal cuts too deep. I trusted you, Rachel, he says, his voice hoarse with emotion. I built this company with you. I built this company with you. How could you do this to me? She opens her mouth to speak, but Thomas holds up his hand to stop her. No, you've said enough. He turns and walks out of the room, his steps echoing in the empty office. As he reaches the door, he pauses, looking back at her one last time. You're not just hurting the business, Rachel. You're hurting everything we've worked for, everything we built together. The door closes behind him with a finality that seems to reverberate through the entire building. Rachel is left standing in silence, her face filled with regret and uncertainty. The days following the confrontation with Rachel are filled with a deafening silence. Thomas has thrown himself into the work, attempting to keep the company afloat, but the weight of his decisions feels heavier each day. One morning his phone rings again. It's Peter, the investor. Thomas, we've given you all the time we can. Peter's voice is stern, almost accusatory. You said you had a plan. Now it's time to deliver. Thomas clenches his jaw, trying to maintain his composure. I'm working on it, Peter. I just need more time, he says, his voice tight. Peter doesn't respond immediately. When he does, his tone has lost any patience. Time is over, Thomas. We're pulling out of this deal unless you can show us results. We've given you enough chances. The line goes dead before Thomas can respond. He feels the room closing in on him. The final warning has come. There's no more time. If he doesn't act, he will lose everything. With a deep, shaky breath, he looks at the reports in front of him. It's time to gamble everything. Thomas slams the phone down, his frustration boiling over. The weight of the moment feels unbearable. He stands still for a moment, staring at the wall as if trying to will an answer into existence. The risk has reached its peak. If he doesn't act, he will lose everything he's built. There is no room for failure anymore. Rachel's betrayal still lingers in his mind, but he knows he has no choice but to move forward. The decision has been made. He gathers his papers and heads to the office of the last potential investor. This is it, he whispers to himself, the words more for reassurance than belief. The door to the elevator dings open, and he steps inside, feeling the weight of his future resting on a single meeting. Thomas walks into the investor's office, his heart pounding in his chest. The office is sleek and modern, a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside him. He's greeted with a polite but distant handshake. Thomas, the investor says, sitting behind a large mahogany desk, we've been reviewing your proposal. Frankly, we're not impressed. The risk is too high. Thomas takes a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. I understand, he says, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. But this is the only option left. If we don't take this risk, we lose everything. My company, my reputation, it all ends. The investor leans back in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk. I don't know, Thomas. It's a huge gamble. Thomas' gaze hardens. It's either a gamble or an absolute loss, he says, his voice growing more confident. The investor narrows his eyes, the tension in the room palpable. All right, let's say we go for it. But this is your last shot. You fail, and you're done. Thomas leaves the investor's office with a sense of both relief and dread. The deal has been made, but the stakes have never been higher. The next few weeks will determine the fate of his company, his career, and his future. As he walks down the street, his mind races with the implications of the gamble he's just taken. His phone buzzes in his pocket, and he pulls it out, expecting another call from Peter. Instead, it's Rachel. He hesitates before answering, unsure of what to say. Thomas, she says softly, I never wanted it to come to this. I didn't think you'd find out. Her voice is almost pleading. He stops walking, his grip tightening around the phone. It's over, Rachel, he says, his voice low but firm. We're done. I can't trust you anymore. There's a long pause before she speaks again, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, she whispers, and the line goes dead. Thomas stares at the phone, his heart heavy with a mixture of sadness and finality. Thomas sits at his desk late into the night, reviewing the final reports that will determine his fate. His mind is sharp, his focus unwavering. The investment has been made, the gamble placed. The company's survival hinges on this decision. As the clock ticks past midnight, he leans back in his chair, staring at the screen. I've done everything I can, he mutters to himself. Now it's out of my hands. The weight of the decision is palpable, but there's also a strange sense of peace in it. He knows the endgame is in motion, but for the first time in days, he doesn't feel completely powerless. The phone rings again. It's Peter. Thomas, he says, his voice curt, we're seeing some positive movement. Keep doing what you're doing. Thomas exhales, a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Thank you, he says, his voice steady. As the call ends, he sits back again, his eyes tired but relieved, knowing that the road ahead is still uncertain, but at least it's not over yet. The next morning, Thomas steps into his office, a mix of anticipation and anxiety tightening in his chest. The previous night's phone call with Peter offered a glimmer of hope, but he knows the battle is far from over. His fingers brush the paperwork on his desk, the weight of every decision pressing on him. He takes a seat, staring out the window at the city below, watching the people rush by, completely unaware of the financial storm that's brewing behind closed doors. The phone rings again, and his heart skips a beat. It's Peter. Thomas, we've been monitoring the numbers. The market's improving. Your investment's starting to look better, Peter says, his tone less cold than usual. For a moment, Thomas lets the words settle in. It feels like the first real sign of progress in weeks. But we're not there yet, Peter continues, a note of caution in his voice. You're not out of the woods. We need to see more movement to be fully confident. Thomas nods, even though Peter can't see him. Understood, but we'll make it happen. I'll do whatever it takes. As the days pass, the numbers continue to improve, but the pressure mounts. Thomas spends every waking hour in his office, working tirelessly to keep the momentum going. Rachel, who has been absent since the confrontation, shows up unexpectedly one afternoon. She stands in the doorway, hesitating before stepping inside. Thomas, she says softly, her voice tinged with regret. I know we have a lot to talk about, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Thomas doesn't look up at first, but her words draw him out of his focus. Slowly, he turns to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resignation. Sorry, he repeats, almost incredulously. Rachel steps further into the room, her body language apologetic. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared, and I thought this was the only way to save us. But I see now that I was wrong. Thomas stands up, his voice cold. You betrayed me, Rachel. You broke my trust. How do you expect me to forgive that? She swallows hard, her voice shaking. I don't expect forgiveness, but I can at least help you now if you'll let me. I'm still here. We can still fix this together. Thomas stares at her for a long moment, the silence thick between them. Finally, he speaks. You're right about one thing. We're not done yet, but it's going to take more than just words. Rachel's offer to help seems genuine, but Thomas can't shake the lingering doubt. He reluctantly agrees to let her assist, but there's an air of caution that wasn't there before. The next few days are a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategies. Every move they make feels like a high-stakes gamble, And though the numbers are improving, the risk still looms large. One evening, after another exhausting day, Thomas finds himself alone in the office, staring at the report. The phone rings again. It's Peter. Thomas, I'm looking at the figures. They're improving, but we're not there yet. You've got one last chance to prove this is going to work. Thomas's stomach tightens as he listens. I'm giving you everything I've got, Peter, he says, his voice tight with emotion. I know what's at stake. Just give me one more week. There's a pause on the other end, and then Peter's voice softens. All right, one more week. But if you don't show significant movement by then, we're pulling out for good. Thomas hangs up the phone, the weight of the final ultimatum pressing on him. 1 week. That's all he has left. The following week is a blur. Thomas and Rachel work tirelessly together, pushing their limits to make up for the lost time. Every meeting feels like it's on the brink of falling apart, but they keep pushing forward. As the final day of the deadline arrives, Thomas stands at his desk, staring at the latest numbers. The pressure is unbearable. He hears the sound of footsteps outside his office and looks up to find Rachel standing in the doorway. She's exhausted, just like him, but there's a sense of quiet resolve in her eyes. We're almost there, Thomas, she says, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. I know we can do this. Thomas looks at her for a long moment, his expression hard. This is it, he says. If we don't show results by today, we're done. Rachel nods, her gaze unwavering. We're not done yet, she says firmly. Not until we say so. Thomas exhales, feeling a small spark of hope. It's not over until the final numbers are in. As the sun sets, Thomas and Rachel sit side by side, reviewing the final numbers. The tension is unbearable as they wait for the last pieces to fall into place. The silence between them is thick, broken only by the sound of typing on the keyboard. Finally, the screen flashes with a final report. Everything has fallen into place. The numbers are in the black. It's not a massive success, but it's enough to save the company. The relief is instant but overwhelming. Thomas exhales deeply, his hands shaking. We did it, he says quietly, the words barely more than a whisper. Rachel looks at him, her face softening with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. We did, she agrees, her voice steady. For a moment, neither of them speak. The weight of everything that has happened still lingers, but for now, they've survived. The company is saved, and with it, their future. The weeks that follow are a blur. Thomas and Rachel work relentlessly, repairing the damage done and rebuilding what was almost lost. The company stabilizes, though the scars of the past linger. One morning, as Thomas sips his coffee in the now brighter and more organized office, he looks out over the city, reflecting on everything that's happened. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's not over. We made it, he whispers to himself, but the quiet victory doesn't feel as sweet as he expected. The phone rings, snapping him out of his reverie. It's Peter again. Thomas, Peter says, his voice warmer than before. You did it. The numbers look good, and we're staying on board. Thomas leans back in his chair, his breath steadying as he takes in the news. I knew we would, he replies, his voice calm but resolute. But deep down, Thomas knows this moment of relief is only temporary. There's still much to be done, and the pressure will always be there. But for now, he can take a breath. Later that afternoon, Thomas meets with Rachel in the conference room, where they go over the latest projections. The mood is different now, less frantic, but still tense. We've made it through the worst of it, Rachel says, her voice steady as she looks over the reports. Thomas nods, but there's a quiet unease in his gaze. For now, he replies, his voice tinged with caution. But I'm not going to let my guard down. We've survived, but we need to stay focused. There's still a long road ahead. Rachel looks at him, her expression soft but resolute. I agree. But at least now we have a chance. We can build something stronger from here. Thomas meets her gaze, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips. We will. Together. A few weeks later, Thomas receives an unexpected email. It's a note from his old mentor, Marcus, a retired hedge fund manager who had taught him the ropes of the financial world. The email is short and simple. I heard about your success. I knew you had it in you. Thomas smiles as he reads the message, feeling a wave of gratitude and nostalgia. He never thought he'd hear from Marcus again, after their falling out years ago, but this small gesture feels like a full circle moment. He replies, thanking Marcus for his support, but also reflecting on how much he's changed since those early days. His journey has been far from easy, but the lessons he's learned have made him stronger. Thank you, Marcus. I've learned more than I could have imagined, and I'm still learning. As the company continues to recover, Thomas is faced with a difficult decision, whether to expand and take on more risk, or to maintain the steady conservative path that has brought them back from the brink. He sits alone in his office, staring at the spreadsheets and projections, his mind racing. A knock on the door pulls him out of his thoughts. It's Rachel. You're thinking about expanding, aren't you? She asks, walking in without waiting for a response. Thomas looks up, his expression guarded. I don't know, he admits. I think we have a shot at growing, but the risk is high. I don't want to put everything on the line again. Rachel sits down across from him, her gaze steady. You've come this far, Thomas. Maybe it's time to take the next step. But only if you're ready. If we do this, we do it together. He looks at her for a long moment, the weight of the decision clear in his eyes. Together, he says softly, the finality of the choice settling in. All right. Let's do it. Months later, the decision to expand has paid off. The company is thriving, stronger than ever before. Thomas stands in his office looking out at the skyline once again, but this time with a sense of calm and accomplishment. The journey has been long and full of hardship, but now, as he reflects on everything he's been through, he knows it was worth it. The phone rings one last time. It's Peter. Thomas, I just wanted to congratulate you. You've done it. You've built something great. Thomas smiles, his voice steady. Thank you, Peter. But I couldn't have done it without the team, without everyone who believed in me. As the call ends, Thomas sits back in his chair, the weight of the past finally lifted. He's made it. He's not just surviving anymore. He's thriving.